all in one object then. You can set up user groups. Again, you know, a group object is just a group object. It helps organize, I guess, or put all your different users into one group that way. There's also a user template, and if you're creating your users, it's easy to use a user template. Whether you're using users or the template, it will have the general screen here, and then it'll have what authentication method are you using. So your authentication method is just the checkpoint password like we've been using, the operating system password, the secure ID ACE tokens, the radius or the TACACS. Those are always your authentication methods. And again, with the user template, it's just anytime you're using a template, it just kind of eliminates a few steps, right? So say we've got a business, and there are 5 people that work in the office and 10 people that work out in the warehouse there or something. So our office people, they've probably got a lot of the same general information. They've got the same authentication. You know, they're in the same location and time and things like that. So we can set those all up, you know, as office workers, the same way for the warehouse workers. Those would probably be similar. So we would just set up our template, and then we just create our users from those templates then, all right? Again, with the new user, I think that was the question too. The user and the user template, well, so you have to actually choose the template there. And then you'll select the authentication. So authentication is on new user and the user template. Again, the access role, we'll be setting up access roles. You'll go into your application control layer here, and you'll set up an object there it'll actually be like for a sales department, something like that. And you'll set it up for the odd users, and you'll log in as user 1 and go out to you'll get at the Captive Portal page. We'll talk about the Captive Portal page to authenticate and different things as we go through the slides. But here, this is where you set up your networks, your users, and your machines into one object. All right. Then down here into the users, it'll actually go through the branches, and it'll bring up some for specific users and groups. And again, as the users, it can be a whole department. It can be your guests. You can set it up for guests, which you'll be doing that. You can set it up for a specific user. And I'll talk about some different scenarios for that. All right. The other item we'll take a look at down here is in servers, and we'll look at the LDAP account unit. And when you're setting up your LDAP your LDAP servers, you can set up different account unit properties for that. And when you're setting up the LDAP account unit, there's also different profiles depending on what kind of servers you're using. Again, remember the OPSEC partners, those are the third-party software companies that develop their programs to work in conjunction with Checkpoint. If you've been around for a while, you might remember Novell and Netscape for directory services. Those are pretty old school now, but obviously they're still in use. So you can set up your account unit properties to work in conjunction with your directory servers that way. And you can set it up for CRL retrieval, user management, or if it is set up for Microsoft Active Directory, you can have the Active Directory query. For servers here, this is where you would come in and you would add something like your LDAP server. In here, there's different ports, and you'll want to remember these ports for just general connectivity. It's going to use TCP port 389. For encryption, if you'd go into encryption, they would use port 636. You would just put in your administrator username, the distinguished name, and the password here. For objects management, this is where it can you can add different paths for your branches and fetch the different branches for your hierarchy that you've got set up in your organization. Again, authentication, these are the 5 authentication methods. If you're just using Secure ID and Checkpoint, you can go ahead and uncheck these others. There is a default authentication scheme here, so you can just select, what your default authentication scheme is. So that's the LDAP account unit. So I just kind of wanted to show you where some of those different items were, but before we get into the identity awareness. All right, so we'll go ahead and jump into the slides here. So we'll talk about defining users and user groups and how to manage these users for internal and external users. And again, we'll set up that, we'll talk about Captive Portal and setting up the access rules. So that's the big part of the lab here. So you saw this is where I went up and I just opened up the Object Explorer, and this is where we looked at some of these different items, those components there. Okay, so user directory LDAP. The Checkpoint user directory, the user directory is the Checkpoint software, all right, that utilizes the LDAP servers to identify and authenticate your network users, all right. You can, it eliminates the risk with manually maintaining and synchronizing redundant data stores, enables centralized user management throughout the organization. The LDAP server, so I mentioned, you can create users. If it is a small business, you can create your users, and they're just managed. They're on the security management server, right? It's just an internal users database that way. But if you've got a large number of users, you're probably going to want to manage them externally. Again, with the SMS, if you go in and you make a change in the user, or you hire a new person, or you fire somebody, or somebody moves from the warehouse into the office, you're going to have to go into the management server, make that change, and then update the database on the management server. Again, using LDAP, that's all external that you can set it up. The user directory, when you set up the user directory here, that does require a special license. If you're setting up, we talked about the mobile access, kind of went on the VPN when we talked about remote users. So if you're setting up mobile access and you got the mobile access software blade, that automatically includes the user directory license. So for identity awareness, so now, and I kind of mentioned this yesterday, but now we've got different users are going to actually authenticate in, and if they're in LDAP, their access is just transparent to them. They'll just access anything like they normally have. But we'll talk about instances where we have to use the Kerberos single sign-on or the access portal that way. But so now, I kind of mentioned this yesterday when we were setting up the policy layers. Now we can see that it's Sue that's going out to monster.com, 10 times a day trying to find it. Is there anything better out there that I can find? So we will see as they go through the gateway now. Once our identity awareness is set up, that instead of just in a source IP that doesn't really mean anything to us, we can actually see the usernames in our logs as we go through there. Again, you'll be setting up access roles that has the network location, the identity of a user, and the identity of a machine into one object. So the identity awareness, again, this is a blade on the firewall object. So when you click that box for that blade, it's going to open up a wizard, and you're going to go through several pages on this wizard, all right? And I'm actually going to do that because it's kind of quirky sometimes the way that works in our labs. But this is the first page that will come up. And it says how users will be identified by Active Directory query. And again, the keyword is seamlessly. It seamlessly identifies Active Directory users and computers. So if that person is in Active Directory, they're going through the gateway, and we've got a rule that allows their access, through the gateway to whatever destination they're going to. It's just seamless for them. On the other hand, what we'll be setting up is that we'll be checking this box for the browser-based authentication for the Captive Portal. The transparent Kerberos, this is if you're using single sign-on, that even if they're not in Active Directory or if they're set up for single sign-on, the Kerberos is going to try to authenticate them first without the captive portal page having to come up. Otherwise, that captive portal page will come up and they'll authenticate there. This is that account unit properties that I kind of clicked through. Again, there are these different default profiles. So when you're setting up the identity awareness or the mobile access, you can use the you can create the new LDAP account unit. Like I say, again, it can be used for CRL retrieval or user management. And for user management, we have the different profiles that are set up. And depending on you know which directory server type they're going to use, it can correspond to the specific LDAP server and use those. You can utilize those profiles. Okay, so this guy is in Active Directory. Okay, so he logs into he comes into work, he logs into the domain, and then he's going to browse to these servers over here on the other side of the gateway. All right, so the way that works is we see here first we've got our Active Directory domain controller and we've got our gateway here, and we see stuff going back and forth. So when this guy logs into his domain, that's going to update the security event log. And so the security event logs, as that's updated here in the domain controller, that gets sent up here to the gateway. So the gateway has that. It registers to get the security event logs from the Active Directory domain controller. All right. So now, as he brings up his whatever he's using, whatever application he's using to access these servers over here, now the security gateway is it confirms that the user's been identified. Again, just from these security logs, it recognizes him from his domain login, and it allows him to access these servers over here. Again, if there's a security policy rule that allows that. So this is the browser-based authentication. This is the captive portal page, and so what happens is if you're a non-Active Directory user, you or your machine are not in Active Directory. If you're using a non-Windows operating system, so if you're using a Mac or if you're using a Linux-based computer, or if you're a guest user, for example, you'll try to access through the internet, and it's going to pick up the captive portal rule. When it picks up the captive portal rule, that's going to redirect to the firewall's IP address /connect/portal main. All right. So this page is going to pop up. If it's a guest user, or in our case, it's going to be the odd group. So you're going to log in as user 1, the checkpoint password. You'll click the login, and it'll say access has been granted for a specific amount of time. So now you can come up here and you can open up another window and go on out to the internet wherever you want it to go to. All right. Another thing you can do is if you've got a non-Windows operating system, you can set up endpoint identity agents. It'll set up a little link on here. So if the person has a Mac computer, for example, he can click on that link for the endpoint identity agent and install that agent on his computer, and then it'll use that agent to authenticate through. So there's 3 different types of endpoint identity agent. The full endpoint identity agent includes packet tagging. It does require administrator permissions for use. All right. This packet tagging, what that is, it's a way of marking your packets with an identifier. So now as it gets to the gateway, it's not like the anti-spoofing is not going to kick in or whatever. Okay. It'll allow it prevents spoofing from that connection and passing through the gateway. The light endpoint identity agent doesn't include the packet tagging. It doesn't require administrator permissions. And then there's a custom endpoint identity agent that you can kind of blend these two. But you just want to remember that the full endpoint does include the packet tagging, and it does require administrator permissions. Okay, so how does that work? Well, now we've got our Active Directory domain controller. But the first thing is this guy is going to log into his domain, all right? And we've enabled identity awareness on our gateway, but it doesn't recognize this user. He's not in Active Directory, all right? So the gateway is going to send a page to the user that shows the captive portal. So it's going to redirect to that that connect/connect page, the CAPTIV portal page is going to open up, and it has a link on there, so he can download the endpoint identity agent. He downloads that agent and installs it on the computer, and now the agent is what is going to connect to the gateway. And again, if the Kerberos single sign-on is configured, he's automatically connected. Otherwise, he authenticates through that CAPTIV portal page, and then he can get on out here to these servers. Again, if there's a security policy rule that allows that. For Radius, this is a little more complicated. Now, this is where Radius is handled by the authentication server. So here, the gateway with the Radius server, you have you set up a Radius accounting client, and that's where the computer gets its user identities from this Radius accounting client. And you actually install that client on the gateway itself. So now the gateway becomes the Radius server client. All right. So now using Radius, the gateway is going to forward the authentication request to the actual Radius server, because it is the client now. We've got the user coming through, hitting the gateway. So it's going to send that information to the Radius server that has the user account information. Then it's going to, for the Radius server, it's going to use that information to get these requests for the user and device group information from the LDAP server. So the LDAP server is still going to authenticate the user. The security gateway lets you control access privileges for the authenticated users. The Radius protocol uses UDP to communicate with the gateway. How to choose an identity source. Again, if it's AD query or AD query and browser-based authentication, you set up your Active Directory query for logging and auditing. For AD query and browser-based, that's for application control or data center internal server protection. The endpoint identity agents, again, this is when it requires a higher level of security. You'll have a link on that CAPTIV portal page so that the person on the non-Windows domain user will be able to download this agent on the computer and then authenticate. Again, you can set it up for terminal servers, Citrix environments, Radius servers, or for remote access if they're coming in, if your users are coming in from outside your network and they need to authenticate through the gateway. Okay, so Smart Console and User Database. So this is users defined in the Smart Console are saved onto the user database on the SMS. So again, this is you're creating your users. You got that template, or you're just creating your users, and they're actually stored on the management server. Okay, that's called the user database on the SMS. To install the user database on selected targets, you log into Smart Console, you go down Install Database, and then just like we did yesterday when we added the compliance blade, you'll just the SMS target will come up, and that's where you install the database on it. LDAP and User Directory. It's based on a client-server model where the LDAP client makes a TCP connection to an LDAP server. Again, we saw going through that account unit that the default port number for the standard connections was port 389. If we would have gone to that encryption tab and we wanted SSL connectivity, that would use port 636 there. Each entry is going to have a unique distinguished name. Each LDAP server can consist of one or more account units. This says user directory is enhanced with LDAP's high availability replication feature. So what this means is that, again, I can authenticate through Virginia, through Dallas, or through San Francisco, right? I've got different locations that I can authenticate through. So what the company might do then, so say you've got three different gateways that a user can authenticate through. You might have an LDAP server. You might have 3 LDAP servers. You'd have an LDAP server in close proximity to each one of those gateways, all right? And say all your users will fit on one LDAP server, then now that's just high availability. You just replicated. It's the same LDAP server just in 3 different locations, all right? Now, another way that you can do this is if you have a large number of users, you put a third of your users on one LDAP server, the second third on another, and the second third on another. So now a person goes to authenticate through the gateway, and the gateway first is going to look at the user directory on the SMS. If it doesn't find it there, it's going to have, with the LDAP account units, it's going to be able to rank priorities for these LDAP servers. So say the one in closest proximity has the highest priority, so it's going to check for the user there. Doesn't find the user there. Goes to the one with the next highest priority. Doesn't find it there. Goes to the one with the third LDAP server now. Still doesn't find the user. So it's just going to fall to an external user profile then. Okay. Talking about distinguished name, again, this is just a very simple illustration here, but all we're trying to do in our business is just to organize our business, and we organize it in a hierarchical structure here, all right? So we break down our business into an organization. We have different OU as organizational units. So maybe we've got a marketing department, a sales department, an IT department, you know, whatever it might happen to be. Those are your different organizational units. Then it gets down to each employee in each one of those departments, and that's a common name here, all right? And you can even break down the common name for other, like we get John Brown's email address or maybe, you know, a phone number or something like that, a way to some contact information for him. But what this illustration is just showing is that we see three different John Browns, and these are actually three different people, all right? This John Brown, the common name John Brown, works in the organizational unit of marketing in the ABC company, the ABC organization. This John Brown works in the sales department of ABC company. This John Brown works at XYZ company. Both of them are in the country of the United States, but both the companies are in the country of the United States. Again, so this is in red. So this is going to be on the exam. Using multiple LDAP servers allows you to achieve compartmentalization, to gain high availability, and achieve a faster access time. Again, you can set up LDAP groups to classify your users. Then you use those groups again, just like a group object, just in the security policy rule. All right. The user directory has a default schema, has user definitions for the LDAP server. Again, schema, you're just talking about the structure of the data. I've got this in red because there will be a question on the exam about what the user directory schema is, and the keyword in there is rules. It doesn't say anything about structure or data or anything about that, but the word in there is it's a set of rules, and that's what you want to remember there. You can also use certificates to secure communication with the LDAP servers. These are the user directory profiles. So you remember when we pulled up the Active Directory object, and there was the OPSEC, the Novell, the Netscape. So again, it just makes sure that the user management attributes of an SMS are correct for the associated LDAP server. So whichever one of these directory servers we're using, it gets the enhanced specific attributes for Novell or Netscape or OPSEC or whatever. This is what I mentioned before, how the gateway is going to search for to find a user that's trying to get through the gateway. It'll first look in the internal users database on the SMS. It'll go to the LDAP server to find an account unit with the highest priority. It'll go to server to server to server. And if it exhausts all its options there for all the LDAP servers, it'll match the user against a generic external user profile. And these were the authentication scheme, the checkpoint password, OS password, Radius, Secure ID. The Secure ID, those are those ACE tokens. I don't know if you ever use those or not, but we use those for years. And actually, I don't know if they still use the tokens or not. But there's a lot of multi-factor. Everything uses multi-factor authentication now, and a lot of it was on my smartphone too. I would try to access something and it would say, do you want a push notification? And I would say yes, and it would, all of a sudden I'd get a ding on my smartphone. I'd go in, you want to accept or deny? Of course, I'd want to accept, and then the page would open up to allow me in. So there's lots of other authentication schemes now too. There's TACACS and undefined. Now with undefined, what that means is that there is no authentication performed. So if a user is set up with an undefined authentication scheme, and it's matched to a rule that requires some type of authentication, then the access is always going to be denied. Okay, so this is the access role. I just finished my coffee. It takes a lot of throat lubrication for all this talking here on this. The rest of it won't be so much talking though. This is the longest one. This in VPN is kind of a lot of slides, a lot of talking. But you'll set up the access role in this lab. Again, this is where you set up your network, user, and machine into one object. Once the identity awareness is set up, then you can set up these access role objects and use them in the source and destination columns of your rules. All right. So for this is an example of a rule. So here you set up an access role for the sales department to access the sales department web server, and the action is to display the captive portal. What you'll do is you'll set your rule in place. You'll create your, and again, this will be in your application control layer. You'll set up your access role here. On the action, you right click and you'll have to display the captive portal. All right. So normally with the R80, they don't go into this, but there were 3 different scenarios in the R77, and I think this it helped me understand the difference between needing access roles and not needing access roles. Kind of how you set these rules up. Okay. So and once I go through this, then we're about done with the slides. So when you come in and say we've got a rule in place, an existing rule in place, okay? We've got Joe over in the HR department, and Joe has a desktop computer. It's got an assigned IP address 10.1.1.1, okay? And so we just have a source in here, Joe at 10.1.1.1. His destination is the HR web server for HTTPS, and the action is accept. And then that works fine. He can easily access it. He hits that rule. He accesses it all the time. But he comes to us and he says, well, what I'd like to do, we're kind of a large organization here. We've got different floors in this building that I'm in, and we're on a campus, so there's other buildings on the campus. So whenever a new hire comes in, what I'd like to be able to do is to have a laptop computer without an assigned IP address on it, so that I can so when there's a new hire, I can just unplug my laptop, go over to on another floor or another building, wherever this new hire is, sit down with them, plug into their network, and get all their new hire information, and I can access the HR web server, put their new hire information in, and everything will be set and ready to go. All right, but he's a lot different than most HR people. All right, so anyway, that's what he wants to do. Can we do that? And we say, sure, we can do that. So what do? We create an access role. Network, user, and machine. Well, network, we're going to have to set that up for any network, because he could be any place in our corporation. For the user, we can just set it up for Joe, or if there's others in the HR department that are wanting to do this, we can do that just for the HR department. For the machine, he probably does have a machine name that we could put in there that might be part of the LDAP. So we put that account unit as the source. The destination is the HR web server for HTTPS. Now the action is just going to be accept, because Joe is he's included in LDAP. He and his machine are in LDAP. So now we can just have the action as accept. So now when there's a new hire, Joe unplugs his laptop, goes to the new hire, plugs into that network. He goes to access the HR web server. The traffic's going to hit the firewall. It's going to bounce down to this rule for Joe's HR access role here to go to the HR web server, HTTPS, and action is accept, and he'll be allowed to access the HR web server. Okay. Now, the second scenario is a lady comes to us and she's got a new, we'll say she gets a new iPad for her birthday. And she wants to take her personal iPad into work with her and access the finance server with her own personal iPad. And if that was us, and then we want to do that, they'd say, no, just you've got a business laptop. If you need to access the web server, you're going to use your business laptop. The only thing is this lady is the CEO of the company. So we say, yes, ma'am, we'll get that set up right away. And so what we do, we create an access role down here. We as a network, she probably just doesn't stray too far from her, her walnut paneled office up there in the conference room. So we might be able to put a network in place there for that subnet. For the user, we would browse to her. We'd fetch the branches for the different users, and we'd find her there as a CEO. And then the machine, we would not have that. That's her own personal machine there. So we would put a rule in place. We'd set up the access role as the source for CEO access. The destination would be the finance web server. Service would be HTTPS. The action would be accept, but it's going to display the captive portal. So now what happens is she comes in to work with her personal iPad. She opens up the browser to browse to the financial web server. It's going to the packet's going to hit the firewall. It's going to come down and hit this rule. It's going to say, oh, okay, she's allowed to go to this using that service. However, we've got to display the captive portal here. We've got to display the captive portal. So the captive portal page is going to pop up. She'll put in her username and her password and click log on, and it's going to come up and it'll say, okay, you have access to this web server, to this destination for a certain period of time. Okay, so that's how that's going to work. And again, if we would look in the logs, we would see the CEO there. We would see her name there accessing that finance server for HTTPS. Okay, so now the third scenario is that we have guests that come over into our company. The people from other companies come over to talk to the CEO. And so they're waiting outside her office to talk with her, or maybe they met in a conference room and they're taking a break in the conference room, and while they're not busy, they want to access their corporate email. Okay, so can we set that up? Well, we can. Again, we'll create an access role. The network, we can probably put in a network if it's just there for the conference room, or the subnet where her office is, or whatever. The destination will just be out to the internet. The service is probably just HTTPS or whatever that is to access, to access that email. The action would be accept and display captive portal. So that guest then would just open his computer. He would browse out to try to get to his email, and then the captive portal page would come up. So we would give him just a password. He would sign on as guest, and the password would be whatever password we told him it was. The only thing is now, since he's a guest, we might have some other items on there. He might have to agree to some terms and conditions. He might have to put in his name. He might have to put in his email address or his phone number. And we can also limit the time. And I'll show you where all this is, on the firewall when we get this set up. But we might want to limit this time to just like 30 minutes or something like that. Okay. So again, he opens it up, and browses to this, and he is allowed to go out and access his internet as long as his email, as long as he complies with the restrictions that we put on there. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense about the captive portal and how it interacts with LDAP, and whether it's transparent or the captive portal page pops up. This just mentions the same thing about the guest users that I just talked about. Okay, and so providing user access. How do access roles work within a rule base? Again, it can be created using the source or destination columns of the policy rules. They allow administrators to configure network access according to networks, user, and user groups computers, computer groups, remote access clients. Again, you're just putting the network, the user, and the machine. If you've got that information into one object that you can use in the source or destination columns of your rules. All right. So, any questions about that? Like I say, that's a lot to cover, but did that bring up any questions or any ideas that you might be able to use in your environment? Okay, well, it's about 11:45 now. What I'll do, I do want to show you something on how to set this up, all right? But before we go into the lab, because I'll have my own notes on how to set this up, all right? Now, when you do set this up, you'll open up we'll just be doing this on the alpha side, all right? So when you gateway cluster, you'll come down here in the middle column, and the next to the last item here is identity awareness. So when you click the identity awareness, it's going to pop up a wizard. There's the wizard, all right. And we saw a slide on this. AD query is selected by default for seamlessly identifies Active Directory users. We're going to set it up for browser-based authentication. It's going to have us to create a new domain, and it'll tell you this step by step. But I just kind of want to work through this because we kind of have to force this to work because we don't have the A host and we can't log into that. So our domain is alpha.cp. The user is going to be administrator. The password is just the checkpoint password. And the domain controller is our LDAP server, 192.168.11.101. All right. Now, this is what I want you to pay attention here, because this is the second step, and it'll tell you to go step by step. Then it'll say to connect here. Now, you might connect and you might not connect, okay? And normally when I do this, I kind of hope that I don't connect so you can see that you can just move on here. And it does spin. If you connect, you pretty much connect right away, and then you just go to the next page. If you don't connect, which here looks like I'm not going to connect. And again, some of you will, some of you won't. Sometimes you connect, sometimes you don't connect. Again, just what I'm showing you here is don't worry about it if you don't connect. All right. And I've got some notes. I've got some notes on here. Let me go ahead and put this in chat for this chapter. Okay, so like I say, don't worry about it. See, test could not be completed. So then it says down here, there's the box. It just says ignore the errors and continue to configure the LDAP account. So you just check that box there. This shows you the distinguished name for the administrator. Again, you're not really going to use that any place, but that's just kind of informational for you right there. All right. So if it's completed, that's fine. You'll go to the next. If it can't be completed, just check this box here and go on to next. This page just shows you, this is just a sample rule up here. You'll be setting it up for your sales department with the access role, and you'll set up the accept with the display captive portal. This is the URL is, again, the captive portal page is going to redirect to the firewall IP address /connect. You'll come into this edit, and this says is accessible through the internal interfaces, and it'll want you to check these three boxes here. Okay, so far we're just following through just like the notes say, and then we'll finish. Now, I wanted to show you something here on the identity awareness, because I said I would show you where those okay, are we well, it's not. Oh yeah, okay, this is where I get to it. So the browser-based authentication, if I go into the settings here, This is where, remember it talked about the identity agent, and there were the different identity agents. So if you did want to include that link on your Kathy portal page, this is where you would come down. Again, you're not doing this on the lab, but this is where you would find that. And you could select the full agent, the light agent, or the custom agent here. All right. So that's where that is. For the guest login, there's settings here. And this is where the access will be granted for so many minutes, 180 minutes. Again, you can make this whatever you want. You can make it 30 minutes if you want to, all right? It said you can ask them, make them agree, sign a user agreement here, ask for a user agreement. And it actually, if you click on that box and click this edit over here, what you see, it actually provides a user agreement for you, okay? You can go ahead and put your company name up here, or you can customize your own agreement right there. The other thing is you can have them put their name on here, their company name, the email address, or a phone number. You can have them comply with all of that before they're allowed to get out to the internet. All right, so I'm just going to cancel all this stuff. I'll undo that. Now I'm going to, now I'm going to publish this. I'm going to install the policy because I'm going to show you here as you're going through the lab. I'll show you what we need to do to actually force this to work. All right. The other thing you're going to do, well, let's see, I'll install the policy too. I know this takes some time to walk through this, but if I don't, we'll probably just do this during a lunch and lab, so you can work on this during your lunch time, and by going through this, you'll know what to expect if you're looking at this now. It'll actually save you some time later on. So when you create the access role, you're going to go into the application control policy. You're going to create a new rule, and in the source of the application control policy, it's going to have you to create the access role. So you come over here to new, and when you do it this way, see the access role is just right there. It makes it real easy for you to do. So you'll call this, I don't know, it's called sales or something, and you'll come down to a specific network, and it'll tell you to use the A internal network, but actually, if you're going to browse out, well, we'll probably be just browsing out from your A GUI, and remember your A GUI is on the 10-dot network. You can go down to the LDAP server if you want to, but for your specific network, go ahead and add the A internal network and the A management network here. All right, and then your users. You'll come down here and it'll say add a specific user group. Now sometimes this is where it gets kind of hokey, and this is what I wanted to show you down here. This says loading, and sometimes it'll load up properly. Other times you'll have to cancel out of this and come back in again. But what it's trying to do here is fetch the branches, and you want to fetch the branches for the odd group. If you can show organizational units here, or you can look for your user groups, or you can just look for individual users here. But see, that's not going to load. It would have loaded by now. So what you can do is you can just cancel out of here, and then we'll try it again. Usually it'll work the second time. I think what happens is we tend to rush it. So for specific networks, the A internal network and the A management network, under users, specific users, we'll hit the plus sign, and hopefully it'll load up this time. Or maybe not. Well, I think it's still not going to find that. And again, like I say, sometimes you just have to do this several times. I don't know why it's so particular. I think sometimes we do just kind of rush it or whatever. But anyway, when this comes up, you'll select the odd group. Okay, I'll do it one more time. I'll do it from here, see if this makes a difference. Oh, I don't want to use a group. I want the access role. I'm sorry. Come on, there. Okay, finally. It just takes a few times. So you'll type in odd up here, and you'll select your odd group. All right. So I'm sorry that took a while. And then the machines are just any machines. So you'll say, okay, so you'll use that in the source of your application control policy. So now you'll get through, we'll just kind of walk through this. It starts on page 597. So you'll go through the wizard here, just like it says. And again, it says connect. And of course, they're going to show it successfully connected. If it does, that's fine. Click next. If it doesn't, don't worry about it. Just click the box there like I did and click next. All right. You'll edit this here and you'll select the three boxes. And then you'll finish it up. This is just going to have you look in the global properties, and it's going to tell you that the license is required for this. You'll publish the changes, install the security policy. Then here's where you'll put in your application control rule for the marketing access to go out to Skype, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Snapchat. So then this is where you'll select your access role as the source. It's the marketing department, not sales, but so it's marketing. Again, on the specific networks, you want to include the A internal network. But if you're browsing out from your A GUI, if you use A internal network, you'll need to browse out from your A LDAP server. That's the 192.168.11. If you're using your A GUI browser, you just add the A internal network and the A management network. That works the easiest. You'll come to specific user groups. You'll select, publish the changes. So now on your rule, you'll come in here, you'll right-click the action, you'll come down here to more, and you'll enable the Identity Captive Portal. Your outgoing rule, I don't think you really have to. You've already got the URL filtering. You've got everything already set up on that. Oh, they want you to Wi-Fi net to the AlphaNets group. Again, we're not going to be using the Wi-Fi net but you can go ahead and do that. And so now this says log into a host machine. Okay. Well, again, we can't log into our a host. So what we do to make this work is that we'll just open up the gateway, the cluster object. So this is how. So when you get to the final page, when you're testing on page 612, just use the browser from the A GUI. All right. And so you'll come in here. You'll come down to the identity awareness. And then there's a link on here, the 203.0.1.3.1/connect. So once you've got everything in place, you've pushed your policies, and then everything is all ready to go, you've got your odd user group, just come into the identity awareness and just click on this link. What that's going to do is it's going to redirect up here to the /connect. Say the site's not secure, go on to the web page. And then here's your portal main. Here's your captive portal page. All right. You simply sign on as user 1 and the checkpoint password and log in. It says network access granted for 12 hours. So now you can just open up another browser and browse out to wherever. All right. So now that I've done that, now I can come back here and look in my logs. Logs. Take out my VPN stuff. And so the point of all of this is we just want to see user 1 in the logs now. So here's my user 1. See, I just went out to one website there. Look at all the log entries that were created for this. But so I can see my user 1. So that's the point of the whole thing. All right. So now you'll come in here and you can take this off. Go ahead and log out of the network access here. And so then on the next portion of this, you're going to log in as the guest user. So again, you're not logging into aHost. Just follow the notes that I've got in the chat. All right. You can open up the logs then, and you'll see your user 1 there. Here's the user 1. So now you're going to add another rule up to the top of the rule base called guest access. Service and applications are news and media sites. All right. Again, you're going to, this says you'll create your access role. Users is all identified users. This says add the Wi-Fi net as a specific network. Again, if you're browsing out of your A GUI, don't use the Wi-Fi net. Just use your A internal network and the A management network. You can add the Wi-Fi net if you want, but we don't really even use that subnet. All right, as you're setting up the access role. The guest is just all identified users. So now you'll put that access role in as the source. You're going out to news and media outlets, except with the captive portal. Publish the changes, install the security policy. You will not be powering on the aGuest virtual machine. All right, let me post the rest of the information here into chat. You're just going to open up the browser again. All right. We don't do anything with the virtual machines. So as it says here on page for 618, there is no aGuest virtual machine to power on. Again, just use your desktop browser to CNN or some other news site. If you don't get the cert warning, captive portal, try another browser. Instead of the Wi-Fi network, you want to use the A internal network and the A management network. And then again, if you didn't do it earlier, log out of the captive portal page from the user 1 guy. All right. So now you log in as guest, the checkpoint password, and then you should be able to get out to CNN or Fox News or wherever you want to try that. All right. Then you won't be powering off the aGuest virtual machine, and you can look at your logs. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay, you guys are quiet. So I've got 12 noon. So let's go ahead. We'll just do a lunch in the lab. And again, if you've got questions about that, just post it. You probably will. But again, if you just follow along with what I put in the chat, it should work out just fine. We'll call this lunch and lab for 60 minutes. Return by, what would that be, 1 p.m. Central Time. All right. Okay, so take it away on that. Again, just let me know if you've got any questions about anything. I'll be going down to grab some lunch too, but I'll come up like every 10 minutes or so, and I'll see if you've posted anything in chat. If you've got any questions about something, I'll get with you, and we'll work that out, okay? All right, so take it away. Again, just follow my notes in chat. You'll do it. You'll set it up just like it says in the book, in the lab pages. But for the networks, again, just make sure you include the A internal network and the A management network, depending on where you're going to go out of. All right, just add both of those, and then it should work for you instead of the Wi-Fi net. Okay, so take it away, guys, and I'll see you guys in an hour then. And of course, we can take longer than that if it's necessary. I realize you're eating lunch too, and this does take a little while to set up, but it goes pretty quickly.